You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is...
Jim lad, shiver me timbers. It's shipmate Simon Day.
Yarrr. And what did he cursed us with watching this week?
A barrel of overacting. It's Cutthroat Island from 1995. Directed by Rennie Harlin and starring Geena Davis, Matthew Modine, and Frank Langella.
I think you can do either. I've heard both.
Yeah, I'll go for the Geller.
I'm with you.
What a cheeky number. You wanted to do this for a long time, I think.
Me?
Yeah, you kept mentioning
it. It's true.
Every time we talk about something, you went, Cutthroat Island.
I wake up at like 3 a.m, pretty much 3 times a week, and I just go,
You did say last week, Geena Davis in leather trousers.
So let's start with what I liked about the movie.
I felt a bit gypped at the start where you kind of got Geena Davis naked, but you weren't allowed to see anything.
Oh,
because she kind of got dressed in Austin Powers way, kind of going past tables and things.
And that was the last you would get of that, and you know it feels always awkward objectifying Geena Davis because she has now made her whole career about like women in film and all that, and I try to respect all that as much as you know. I think it's a good thing. I'm on board with it, and yet Geena, you're a lovely woman. So did you see this masterpiece in the theater?
No, I had no idea. And I was watching pretty much 3 films a week between 94 and 1996. So the fact that this came out and I totally missed it is pretty damning. I can only guess that I saw it advertised, but didn't want to go and see it, and it probably only lasted a couple of weeks.
That's probably true. It was heavily promoted in the States. You couldn't avoid it for a while. And this is in kind of the era where if they advertised too much, it started to have the stink of desperation. And yet, my dad, brother, and I all piled into my dad's car, went to the theater, and watched it.
Well, so you actually saw it in the theater.
Yeah, and we knew it wasn't supposed to be good, but we're like, how bad can it be?
Well, you know, I would argue, jumping ahead a little bit here, but I would argue
please.
It's not that bad. It's just kind of bland. It's like, because I was thinking watching it last night, it's not really doing anything different to the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just lacking a Johnny Depp, you know?
You have just stolen my review, sir.
I'm sorry. I apologize. But yeah, I mean, it's just like all the characters, like, you know, more blur, you know.
Yeah. And I think that really is the biggest sin of the film is it has this amazing set. They have apparently 2 giant pirate ships they made for this movie.
Yeah, they did actually build those, and then blew one up.
and they had these, you know, the amazing towns and all that they filmed in Malta and Thailand, and the amazing kind of set pieces, where I'm not sure you
Yeah,
wouldn't have floated past Dr. No, or the man with the golden
yeah,
gun rather. um
yeah. Some beautiful, beautiful scenery and stuff.
and then the script is kind of meh. I
Well,
mean,
it's
the story
okay.
is kind of meh, and then I think the dialogue is well intentioned, and they have actors who are fine in modern things, could not pull off doing the period thing that they were doing.
Well, I didn't believe anybody in this was from the 1600s. You know, it's like Frank Langella's probably had the most fun as the
Mm-hmm.
villain, but then Geena Davis, she kind of like she's normally really reliable as an actress, but in this, maybe because she was concentrating on the stunts, she kept like kind of gurning at the camera or like grimacing,
Yeah.
and and then Matthew Modine was just like doing a kind of professional bullshitter, cheeky man, light-hearted, cheeky scamp fella. But it was I don't know, it was just like nothing was really gelling together. You didn't really feel any chemistry between the two leads.
It comes out of
Um,
nowhere when they decide they're in love.
well, yeah, because he kind of does that when he's still pretending to be a doctor. He kind of examines her and takes the color the ball from the gun out of her kind of stomach, which she gets shot, and that she's like the Terminator. That hardly slows her down. In fact, her crew don't know even though she's injured until she
Right.
kills over about 24 hours later. Um, So he kind of like operates on it, and then she goes, "You're not really a Dodge," and they have a bit of banter, and then a romantic moment. And I'm like, that wasn't earned at all.
Nor is the kind of they're in love at the end of the film. Like, they do things together, but
Yeah,
there's, yeah, it so we should probably mention some of the production history of this film, because it's probably like
but that's
other
a lot
things.
more interesting in the film.
Yeah, yeah. We haven't released it yet, but Stuart and I did Black Adam over the weekend, and that's another movie
Oh,
that's like the history of that is way more interesting than the actual film.
well, I've got more notes on the making of than the actual film, which kind of puts in perspective. Um, but this cost 150 million.
In
Um,
1995. That's
that was back when 150 million was proper money.
well,
Proper money.
I believe you're 2 years on from Jurassic Park, and that's 25 million more than Jurassic Park's budget.
Well, yeah, didn't James Cameron get a lot of abuse for spending 100 million on Terminator 2? And that's only about 4 years before this.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a good film. But then this made 10 million. So it cost 150 plus on top of that, that I don't think that's taking into account advertising costs. And it made 10 million, like total in theaters. So it's obviously one of the biggest flops ever. Um, but so it's like a kind of comedy of errors because we kind of talked about this last week. I think the two of us just talked about this last week, but Carol Co was actually going bankrupt. So they were already heavily in debt. And this was they greenlit this to kind of try to save themselves. Which was kind of like putting all your money like in the casino on black at the end of
Yeah.
the night. Um and so Michael Douglas was originally supposed to be Matthew Modine, which would have been interesting, I think, because he's obviously substantially older. Maybe that would have worked better, the dynamic. But he said I can only do it if you do it quickly because I've got other films coming up, and I need equal screen time to Geena Davis. And watching it, I was like, well, I think Matthew Modine seems to be on screen a lot, so I don't know what happened. I don't know if there was rewrites, but Douglas ran off. Geena Davis tried to leave as well, but they wouldn't let her, probably because she's married to the director. Um, and there was like we had a cinematographer got fired, and then I think a dozen people walked out with him in solidarity. Rennie Harlin had a whole town built, but he was so busy trying to find a replacement for Michael Douglas, he didn't really oversee it. So when he finally turned up, he said it's all wrong, had it all ripped down and built again. Um, we also had he used $1 million of his own money on script rewrites because Kelco couldn't afford any pumping any more money into it. So at least he did that. Credit to him for doing that. My favorite one is the man, the legend, Oliver Reed. I think was hard for about 24 hours because he flew into town. He was going to play one of the uncles who had parts of the map and got killed off, I think. He got in a bar, got drunk, got in a bar fight, exposed himself to Geena Davis, and got sacked within 24 hours and was back on the plane. So well done there, Ollie, keeping it real.
I would
Uh,
like to know how many podcast episodes we've had where Oliver Reed does something horrible.
where Oliver Reed has been hired and then sacked just before
Yeah.
the film starts. Um, quite a few, I think, quite a few. Um, and then there was like a sewage pipe burst and flooded the water tanks and poisoned some of the people because that's where they were swimming around. Um, I think another guy, camera operator, broke his leg and had to be replaced. So this was like everything that could go wrong was going wrong in this thing, really.
It's the gods were telling them don't make this film for whatever
It's a bit
reason.
like what's the Gilliam film they kept trying to make? The Man from La Mancha.
Yeah.
It's like that basically. It's like you say, don't make this film. Everything is telling you not to make this film.
Yeah. It and the crazy thing about him like spending $1 million on the screenplay in rewrites is so this time when I watched it, I got about 20 minutes in because Jamie was like, I'm not watching Cutthroat Island. So I was
Uh,
watching it after she went to bed.
she's like,
So
I'd rather watch Jaws 3 again.
so I lowered the volume and I put on subtitles because she'd gone to bed and the cannons in the first act were just keeping her up. Like our house is usually pretty soundproof from this stuff, but this is a very loud movie. Um, so then you're reading the dialogue as it goes along, and I started
Hmm.
realizing like, okay, I think one of the big problems with this film is it is written as if it's like Errol Flynn and Catherine O'Hara doing like Against All Flags. Like it's
Yeah,
written in this like made up what we think the 16th century sounded like. But you have to kind of overact on all of that.
yeah. Well, it's also got these kind of almost like Bond type innuendos all the way through it, which I think only somebody like Roger Moore can really pull off. Um, well, it starts with like, Geena Davis going, I took your balls from that guy who's trying to shoot her. And, there's that joke in the carriage where she starts taking her dress off and she's like, I need to show you something. And Matthew Modine goes, I've seen one before. And it's like, oh, but they're just like selling it so flatly that it's not working. It's just kind of eye rolling.
Yeah, completely agreed. It's very strange. If you'd asked me, well, when I heard they cast Matthew Modine, who I knew from a few things, he'd been kind of a like intellectuals actor in the like 80s.
Full
I'm
Metal
probably
Jacket.
overselling it, but
Yeah.
he was not the guy who I envisioned as being a guy in a pirate movie. I'll put it that way. Maybe the last person I would have thought to put in a pirate movie. And
Well, not having to go, not putting Matthew Modine down, but I think that's because he's one of the last people they asked, to be honest. I mean, like they tried everybody, and I guess people either didn't want to do it or were unavailable. So there was a long list after Michael Douglas of people they tried until they. This was almost like the search for the starlet type thing.
well, that's people who all want to be. Yeah, I mean it was. I think I read something like 10 or 12 people turned it down, and those are the names they know about.
Yeah, like people like Daniel Day Lewis and Russell Crowe.
Yeah, and like everyone basically read the script and was like, "Yeah, I don't think so."
Well,
Which
do you think that's partly because? And I did like this aspect because I was trying to describe this to somebody the other day, like a 20-year-old, and I was saying this was kind of like a girl power movie before girl power because Davis is obviously like the hero,
uh-huh.
and Matthew Modine is almost like the person who keeps needing to be saved, you know?
It's yeah, I think that probably it didn't help that the action lead was Davis and not the male. And I don't know 100% if that's why it kept getting turned down. My assumption is
I
people
don't
were
think so.
also, I mean, I don't know if the movie just had a stink about it already in Hollywood at that point, and people's agents were just like, it's easier to say no than to roll the dice on this. You really had
Yeah.
to get to someone like Modine, who no one ever was handing action scripts to
Yeah. And
before
I'm
you were
sure it
going
was
to
like,
get this. Yeah,
well, I'm sure it was a good payday and it was like a nice holiday, but then it was probably also, like you say, people knew there'd been a lot of problems. And it was like, I could get stuck on this film for like a year, you know? I could
Mhm.
like, it could be like never ending, you know?
Yeah. It sure all signs pointed to that. I mean, and it even as the movie was kind of being promoted and kind of coming out, and I don't remember in the mid '90s maybe looking at like Entertainment Weekly or Premiere or something, you would be aware of like whether movies kind of had a stink on them or not. Ironically, the one I remember having the most stink on it was Titanic. So
Yeah.
it wasn't always accurate, right? But
No.
the
Do you remember Waterworld? Everybody was like slagging off Waterworld way before it came out. And then when it did come out, it was like, that's not that bad, really.
I've only seen it the one time in the theater and had a grand time. I will say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But it
It's Mad Max goes water skiing. That's
yeah,
Waterworld, baby.
yeah. This thing when I went to go see it, I was just kind of like, I think I see what they're trying to do. And in reading Roger Ebert's review of the film, who gave it 3 out of 4 stars, I want to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said this thing hits all the beats of a pirate film. If you don't
Yeah.
like the basic story, you don't like pirate movies, but he also was much more enamored with like clearly Geena Davis and
Yeah.
like oh my god, they actually
In his
made this
trousers.
thing in 1995. And I
Well, I
think
think that's,
I go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's the thing. It's not necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just not doing anything new. I mean, they have to find different parts of a map and each place they go, they kind of end up like having a big fight scene and smashing the town up. And it's okay, but I think the reason Pirates of the Caribbean worked was because you had Johnny Depp almost breaking the fourth wall in it as this, and also like playing this almost like postmodern, almost like Inspector Clouseau, where everybody thinks he's great, but he's actually rubbish, and it's just like luck that's kind of getting him through. And
I can't believe you made that connection, but it's 100% true.
yeah, it's like and that brought a new twist to it because I think with things like the pirate movies and westerns, modern audiences kind of need a new twist. Otherwise, they're not going to settle for like the tried and tested that we watched in the 50s or 60s or 70s.
Yeah. And it's possible they were like, well, just having a female action lead is that twist.
Yeah,
And but they didn't really write it. And I'll be totally honest, I was thinking about this while I was watching the movie. She doesn't really do a lot in the movie.
she gets punched a lot.
She gets yeah, she's handed her dad's scalp. So
Yeah,
that's just given to her to start the movie. The other two pieces are something Modine goes and finds. The crew
yeah.
doesn't seem to really be behind her. Uh,
No,
she doesn't seem charismatic when she's like, have you ever seen Against All Flags with Maureen O'Hara?
not sure. I think so.
It's that movie wanted this movie wanted to be that movie. It's Maureen O'Hara is a pirate queen, sort of. She lives on like Pirate Island, and she has her own crew and ship, and Aidan Quinn has his own ship, and Errol Flynn shows up, and
Hmm.
romance and adventure ensue, and it is a wild time and a romp. And if you so I have, if I'm gonna admit to any fetishes, like the woman in a pirate outfit is pretty high up there for whatever reason with me. uh
Yeah,
so it's probably the leather pants and high boots and honey
tomboys.
blouse and sword. But
I
Uh,
used to like tomboys obviously when I was age appropriate.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of hot, right? And but she's absolutely phenomenal in it. But she takes action and she does. I mean, it's an Errol Flynn movie where she's kind of the supporting lead.
Yeah.
But
What
she
even
probably herself takes 10 times more action than Geena Davis does in this movie, which is just to say we should do a thing, and
what
everyone else
even
kind of does it.
yeah, what even Marion in like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think partly it's the quality of the writing going on, but like, this was sold on Geena Davis is doing all the stunts. And of course, famously they kept showing that shot where she kind of goes through the window and
Mm-hmm.
then lands back on the carriage. And I think originally she went under the carriage. So on talk shows they kept showing that.
Oh God.
Um, so I don't know that was, but you're right. I mean, she's a bit like like some of the Bond films, like Goldfinger, where Bond is just almost like a kind of like an observer, and it's like you could have kind of taken the main character out of that, and it wouldn't have made a difference to the plot. Um, there's even an argument for Raiders of the Lost Ark, a little bit with that, saying that you could have taken Indiana Jones out, and it wouldn't have changed what happened because the Germans would have still taken it to the top of the hill and opened it and
Right.
melted. Um, So, it's a little bit like that, really. Um, and I think Modine's just more interesting. I mean, to be honest, the best actor in this is the monkey.
Yeah, well, I mean, and what a sign of it being the mid 90s of them deciding they need to have a little capuchin monkey in the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
That may be the one
Called,
thing that
called,
really dates
called.
this movie more than anything.
I have to say, it made me laugh, but I was also offended and stood up and said, "How dare you, sir?" When she called the monkey King Charles, which is his name.
Yeah. But yeah, it's
Also, the fat guy who kind of double crosses them.
sure.
Where did he keep his dove, his pigeon?
In his pocket.
In his pocket or is down his pants? I'm like, there's lots of questions. I was more concerned with asking questions like that than I was watching the plot, I think, which is not a good sign.
Yeah.
I was like, why didn't she search or torture Matthew Modine when they first got on board and just get the piece of map off him rather than let him wander around her room in the dark? Stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it basically ends up making the characters look ineffective. It makes it look like no one really sat and thought about what actually is happening here, what is occurring.
Well,
uh
nobody really, there's no threat either because every time a side has a chance to kill anybody, apart from the two uncles of the star. I think like even when her crew mutinies, they're like put them in the longboat and cast them adrift. I'm like, they could have just killed them there, thrown them overboard,
yeah.
and then later on when she retakes the ship, she does the same thing. She throws them all overboard, and they're like, "We'll get you next time." It's like could have just killed them all. They're obviously that's obviously a setup for a sequel that was never going to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, and then they're all, even the whole thing of them going, oh, no one can find this mysterious island, and then it's right next
There
to
it is.
everything else. It's a gigantic island with a huge mountain sticking up. I'm like, I'm pretty sure people would find this pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I did like the pacing to the edge of the cliff, and then you have to go down the cliff into a cave on the side of the cliff to finish the amount of paces to the treasure. I quite like that, but I was also thinking, how long would it have taken them realistically to get all that treasure out? Ages, probably.
Yeah, it sets up a problem that you don't want to be thinking about during the movie. And I had the exact same thought of I was like, I don't know how you do this without killing people. Like I don't know how they would have gotten the treasure in. I don't know how you would get the treasure back out.
Well, the
Um,
same at the end of the film. It's like, okay, she's got like a floating barrel to show where it is. They're still going to go dive down and get it like doublet by doublet. It's going to take them like a year to get that back.
and then she's standing there with all the treasure in front of her, and you're
Ah,
like,
see, I did it in 5 minutes.
yeah.
Aha.
And every one of those guys can now just retire. Like they're done for life.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
all like, let's keep
Millionaires.
sailing. And I'm like,
Why?
yeah, there's literally no incentive for anyone to do this, including her.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one guy even said, "I want to be a farmer," and I thought he was being serious. I guess that was supposed to be a joke, but I was like, "Yeah, good for you, dude. You could buy a nice farm."
Yeah, it just had so much of that kind of stuff, and then tripping over Modine and Geena Davis's delivery on every freaking line. And the funny thing is, like, you're not wrong about Frank Langella like being maybe the best actor or part of this movie or really getting into it, but at the same
Yeah,
time, while I had the closed captions on, that's when you start realizing what people are saying, because there's lots of shots, and this is really typical of a 90s movie. Like,
yeah,
he just bellows things like, I love this, like, and when there's like a
yeah,
battle going on, and like, just,
yeah. Who do I kill first? Ha ha ha.
yeah, it's all like weird b-roll stuff that you're like, no one needed to say anything in this moment, or else you could have said something relevant to the plot or something
Yeah.
to drive them. And that's all really kind of modern filmmaking thinking. I mean, at this point in movie making, there was a lot of that kind of shit happening, where it basically sounded like the little sound clips they'd put onto like side scroller video games so the bad guy would have something to say.
Well, it's
um
also his death is like it's kind of like an Arnie film death, but it's kind of ridiculous. But I feel like in reality he could have just stepped sideways a couple of paces and been fine. But where she goes like because his name's Dog, so she goes bad dog, and then like she's like waving this stick on fire at him. He's kind of laughing, going, "What are you gonna do with that stick?" And she goes like this, and then she lights this cannon that's been covered up next to him and blows him out the side of the ship. And I was like, okay, it's kind of entertaining, but it's just so stupid as well.
well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to, we're way past the point of worrying about reality. Like, I'm not even going to get into like historically what were pirates like and which this movie doesn't care about,
Yeah,
because it's a fantasy and that's fine. But at the same time, it's like that would have exploded him and the room.
the
She would have
bits.
been showered in her uncle and wood splinters at that point.
Yeah, he would just like grab it like a medicine ball in his stomach and go backwards like some kind of like hilarious circus thing.
Yeah. Um, the
And then
plot
like
of the
this,
film, because we haven't even talked about that, is there's four brothers, I guess. One of
yeah,
them's the bad guy, Dog, who's Frank Langella. There's
Gypsy
three,
Dog.
yeah, there's three others, and they each have a piece of a map that will take them to Cutthroat Island. As you said, it's like way overly simplistic. The
Yeah,
the movie opens on Geena Davis's dad, who's some sort of pirate, one of the pirate kings,
mm,
having to walk the plank and whatever. He's gonna die, so he tells her to cut off his scalp, and that's a piece of the map. The other
yeah,
ones are like way easier to get to, which doesn't make
yeah,
any sense, but whatever. One of them's like a piece of wood, the other one's just like a piece of cloth.
yeah.
um and they basically have to go around and collect the horcruxes, to get to the
Latin,
island.
isn't it? They need Matthew Modine because he knows Latin.
He speaks Latin. Yes,
Yeah.
he's tried to improve himself, and the path to that is by being a thief. So,
And then they kind of like, yeah. I mean, it's and there's bits that I kind of like the eels, which was very silly. I was hoping for more like Octopussy. I was hoping like a couple of people would get eaten by the eels, or they'd end up with an eel on their face during the fight. But there's little kind of glimmers of fun in this, but it just like never really gels. Um, and it's like you got Patrick. We haven't mentioned Patrick Malahide, who it's funny for me because he's like a famous TV actor from the 80s and 90s in England. And I guess he took a run at Hollywood in the 90s because he plays like the English um, captain of the guard or lieutenant of the guard who wants to kind of go into have some kind of relationship with the pirates so they can split the treasure.
mhm.
And then he's got his underling. Was it Trotter?
Yeah,
who is kind of like, I guess like, just this kind of dumb captain. And I'm like, that really reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean as well, being chased around by these kind of idiot English kind of, soldiers, trying to get the money back for the king or the queen. Um, I mean, again, it doesn't really go anywhere. He actually got killed off weirdly arbitrarily because he's like there on board, with Dog, and then just a cannonball does in that case kind of blow up their side of the ship, and he's gone.
Which is an interesting thing because that would incentivize the British Navy to hunt them all down.
Yeah, yeah, because she's already wanted, isn't she? Her poster, she's already pretty well known.
Yeah. That blowing up one of their captains is I mean, which is something that I think the Pirates of the Caribbean movies do much better. Is
Yeah,
like you don't really want to mess with the British Navy. You don't want to mess with any national navy too much in this period, right?
no, no, and like I guess Frank Lagella's plan is like he's going to use this money to buy himself a proper position and become like, was it, did he say commissioner of Jamaica he wanted to be or something?
Yeah, which totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Look,
He's
that is a
wants to go into
reasonable
policy.
plan.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a much safer life, easier life. But yeah, I mean, I didn't hate it when I was watching it. It kind of like it hummed along, and it was like what made me laugh was the music, and I think John Debney did the music, and it's a lot of people said the music's one of the best pieces about it. But to me, it was so overwrought, the
Uh,
music. It's like like all the time. And I know that's kind of pirate music, but at the same time, it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna have a heart attack with this music on. So everything is like it's like trying to make everything important.
well, I think this movie has a pacing problem, and the music is trying to keep up with the pacing. Like everything just kind of flows as a lot of action movies from this period did, from scene to scene. Like you don't know
Yeah.
anything more about Morgan, Geena Davis's character, at the end of the movie than you knew about her at the beginning. That's hard to do.
Did you
Like,
feel did you feel like because we're talking about Pirates of the Caribbean, that was obviously a Jerry Bruckheimer production.
mhm,
Did you feel because this felt very Bruckheimer to me, or like they were aping that?
yeah.
Even down to the color scheme, the kind of golden hue color scheme, which they did in all the Bruckheimer movies in the mid 90s. But I feel like this was like a Bruckheimer wannabe.
I don't disagree with that. I think a lot of things, a lot that was just kind of the mark of a high budget action film at some point in this era.
Yeah,
And I think you get to the Matrix before that really changes.
that's true. Yeah, that was a game changer.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily dispute that. What I found kind of shocking on watching it was everything is told in quips that we're supposed to know about the characters. There's exactly one scene of her having a moment of reflection, sort of, but it's really I spent the whole time trying to figure out what is this guy talking about. He writes articles, he's an author, he wants to go to London. That is the
Yeah,
only moment where like people kind of slow down for 2 seconds.
yeah,
And it's a 2 hour movie, and it
yeah.
just keeps happening relentlessly. So when you end up piling a score on top of that, when every 10 minutes there's a cannon fusillade, I don't think I said that word correctly. Fuselage. I don't know.
Fuselage, fuselage. Yeah,
Okay.
sounds okay to
um
me.
and or you're firing muskets off, or Franklin Gell is yelling at people, or whatever the hell's going on.
He also does a King Kong strut at one point, which made me laugh. He just lifts his arms up like Arnie or something and goes, eh.
Yeah, that, and I think there was just B-roll of him shot doing things, and they just cut it in back into the movie, him yelling things like "I love it."
Yeah.
Um, but I think
I'm gonna
that
kill you. I'm gonna kill you quick, Morgan, because I remember bouncing on my knee as a girl.
well, but then there's and that's a very pirate movie sort of line to have. But
That's Shakespeare as well, isn't it? It's like evil uncle killing off the rest of the family.
yeah, Yeah. I mean, there's definitely they tried to borrow from that for this movie, but the there when Matthew Modine is trapped by the gold in at the end of the film, and Geena Davis saves him, and like and then she goes back to like put the barrel. You don't know that's what she's doing unless you're watching and you're like, oh, she's doing something so she can find the gold later, clearly.
Yeah.
Um
She's going to blow, as she says, she's going to blow out Frank Lega's bosom. Which is amusing if you're English. You're English.
well, I thought that was a interesting choice of dialogue, but she he's Matthew Modine turns around to her and says, hurry, we must get out of here. And she turns around and her line in the movie is, yes, we must hurry. And I was like, and then I'd already read because
I
I'd
didn't say
watched
that.
it over 2 days. I'd already read that they'd spent $1 million on rewrites. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's what you got for your $1 million was, yes, we must hurry.
We know if Rennie Harlan literally stumped up $1 million for to rewrite the script, him and Davis are probably the ones doing it. Because I don't know if you remember when there was that writer's strike around Quantum of Solace, and they kind of said that basically the director and Daniel Craig were the ones trying to fix the script because they couldn't use anybody
Yeah.
officially. I feel like the same thing here. If the director's actually pumped in $1 million of his own money, he's probably the one saying, "What do you think we should say here?" Which isn't the way to do a script.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's they overestimated like how charming all of the characters would be just natively, and so they probably ended up cutting out anything that had been any kind of 90s speechifying about here's who I am that usually happens around like the two-thirds of the movie mark.
Yeah,
Or what emotional journey have I been on? Let me comment upon it. I mean,
yeah.
like freaking Con Air has that in there, and this really doesn't. Um,
Connie's got much better characters than it. I mean, I could see what they were trying to do, where they have the two kind of bald henchmen or right hand men have a fight with each other at the end. But you just don't care about any of these guys because you haven't seen them enough. They haven't
uh,
had time to like establish themselves.
no, and there's like the kid character who you're like, of course, there's a kid character, but
Yeah.
he's a complete liability for the entire movie. He doesn't. He's not helpful. Even in the final fight, you're like, oh, he's going to redeem himself by doing something.
He'd be the one that a few years later would be Shia LaBeouf, basically.
Well, and he ended up being a TV star for a minute. He's kind of disappeared in the past few years, but yeah, it's just anyway. I mean, there's only so many ways we can point out a million other ways this movie isn't very good, but I
Yeah.
think if people got offended, I think people used to get a little bit offended if you went to go see something that was clearly super expensive, and
Yeah.
then it felt like they hadn't like done their due diligence to just make it make sense or make it.
Well, whatever your thoughts on Avatar, when you see Avatar, you know where the money went. And I think, and you could say that about James Cameron in general, I think. Um, Whereas when you watch something like this or Waterworld, I think you're like, hang on, that cost 200 million. It
Yeah.
looks like it's made for like 50 million. Um, and also like it may look good, but who the hell was overseeing the script? It's like, why don't they kind of do that first, nail that down first, then do the other stuff?
Yeah, it needed to continue to be workshopped. I do wonder how much of it was Caralco just absolutely having Rennie Harlin's back to the wall, and because he did work after this. I mean, he had the
Yeah,
world's biggest flop, and then he
yeah.
went out and made Long Kiss Goodnight and Deep Blue Sea
Deep
and
Blue
other
Sea.
films.
Yeah.
So Hollywood
Well,
didn't blame him for whatever reason.
well, he's done interviews since saying that basically they were in massive debt before he even started. So his hands were tied a lot of the time.
Yeah,
Um, Matthew Modine has basically said, yeah, there was a lot of problems as well. He kind of said that basically one of the problems. So this is from Matthew Modine. He said one of the problems was there was three cameras running at any one time, which is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
And he said, Rennie Harlin and Geena Davis were having like, their special vegetable juice shipped in at great expense. And I'm sure, I'm not saying that's any better or worse than most Hollywood stars, but obviously that didn't help. Um, so I don't think it was like particularly any one person. It wasn't like one actor acting like a prima donna, like, like back in the old days, like Brando or something,
Yeah.
where he's totally derailing a film single handedly. But I think just everything added together, plus the fact that, audiences don't really want to see a pirate movie. Pirate movies were totally out of vogue. So what are you doing? Well, you're pumping more money than any other film into a film genre nobody really wants to see.
Which they quit making because they were very expensive.
I mean, I think what Dreber said in his review, they should just cut their losses and sold the ship to Disney for like tours or something. And I'm like, they probably would have made more money that way, actually.
Yeah.
Before this, I can't really think of any other pirate films. There was Pirates, wasn't there, with Walter Matthau, in the mid 80s.
Hmm.
That was a huge flop. I mean, that there was Yellowbeard with
Yeah.
Terry Gilliam and not Terry Gilliam with Graham Chapman and John Cleese. That was a huge flop. So really, there hadn't been a successful pirate film for maybe 30 years at this point. Um, and I mean, yeah, you kind of like you're betting all your chips on a long shot, and it's just not coming off really.
I can't begin to guess. I mean, I never it's easy from our perspective here, 30 years on to second guess and know.
I mean,
Um,
I'm sure at the time they went, Geena Davis is a big star. Rennie
mhm.
Harlin's just done Cliffhanger and Die Hard 2. Carol Coe's had like, Basic Instinct and Terminator 2, as productions, you know, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I mean, like the other side of that is what we've been talking about for now.
Yeah. It's really hard for me to get my head around how this is where they put all the money down.
But I also wonder how much of this was Rennie Harlin. Well, obviously, Carico, it was their desperation. We need a hit. We need a big hit now. But I wonder how much of this was like Rennie Harlin sweet talking them, because apparently they didn't want Geena Davis, and he talked them into she's going to be a great action star. I'm going to make her an action star, which kind of half worked, I think, with this and the Long Kiss Goodbye, Long Kiss Goodnight. But it's like, I mean, how much of that was just him like being a really good salesman? I wonder.
yeah. I think the thing that's wild to me is, we did a couple of years ago, we did Long Kiss Goodnight, and I wasn't super familiar with the movie before we did it.
Hmm.
And it's, to me, by far the best Rennie Harlan movie, like hands down.
Yeah,
Like I really liked it.
better
And
than Deep Blue Sea.
well, I would actually like to do Deep Blue Sea at some point, so we can review it.
We got to do that.
I think I watched that in the wrong spirit the first time I watched it. When I've tried to rewatch it since, I'm like, okay, I think I miswatched this.
I will make you a believer. Trust in me. I will make you a believer. If you can't get down to is it Ice T talking to his parrot? Hey
I
parrot,
believe it's LL Cool J.
LL Cool J. There you
Yeah,
go. And he sings that terrible song over the end credits. My love
yeah.
is like a shark's fin. Mm. So yeah, you gotta love all that. That's fantastic.
But Geena Davis is awesome in Long Kiss Goodnight,
She is. She's really good.
and she is not awesome here. Which I,
Here
I
she's
I feel like I
just
need to like do penance for saying out loud, but
here she's like sunburn and gurning a lot.
yeah. And so I don't know if like she took like went to an acting coach and was like, hey, it didn't clearly work out when I did the pirate film. Um, like what?
I get the feeling that she's probably again trying a bit too hard to be a pirate in this. But weirdly also not. So it's like she's kind of like not investing a little bit, but she's not going the whole way, you know?
I totally know what you mean by that. Yes, and it's the frustrating thing about watching her in the film because I can imagine Maureen O'Hara in Against All Flags delivering some of the same lines of like when Geena Davis tells people like hoist the sails. She doesn't say
Yeah.
hoist the sails. She goes hoist the sails, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, what the hell was that delivery? That's the take you used?
But then other scenes, she kind of tries to really get into the pirate thing. Whereas, I mean, if you want like a good parallel, I'd say look at Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which isn't a great film, but obviously in that, Kevin Costner, it's on record that he tried to do a British accent.
Yeah.
Ebby said, that's bloody terrible. Please don't do that. So he was like, I'm just going to be myself. And it kind of worked. Whereas I feel like Geena Davis is kind of being herself, but occasionally she's lapsing into pirating speak. So you kind of get in this kind of muddle.
Well, I
Um,
think she's actually worse when in this movie when she's being herself because it does not feel like it feels like her character from The Fly is suddenly like a pirate. Like
yeah,
it's not it's she never feels badass. I mean, you have to have an inherent swagger and badassery to be a pirate. And if there's one thing like Jack Sparrow had in spades, right?
well,
And I'm
yeah.
sorry, who's the other famous guy who's in Pirates of the Caribbean?
Oh, Jeffrey Rush.
Jeffrey Rush. Like
Yeah.
that dude just shows up and just oozes charisma, right? I mean, even though he's the
Oh,
gross
yeah.
bad guy, he's
Well,
he's
imagine
awesome.
imagine Pirates of the Caribbean if Johnny Depp had just played himself.
Yeah.
It would have been crap, right? And we'd have said, why is he being lazy? It's not very good. But he just totally went, I'm going to go full on panto in this. Not only am I going to be a pirate, but I'm going to be a drunk pirate who thinks he's great and he's actually an idiot. Um, and we loved it. And
Yeah.
and I'm not saying Gina Davis had to do the same, but I think if she'd have actually committed, it might have worked a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, when Errol Flynn's in a movie, if you guys have ever watched like Captain Blood or definitely Against All Flags, definitely Adventures of Robin Hood, which is like one of the best movies ever made. Look, no one acts like that in real life. Like Errol
No.
Flynn did a thing and everyone was trying to catch up with him and match his energy. And in Adventures of Robin Hood, it totally works because he's against like Claude Rains and Basil Rathbone and like an amazing all-star cast. And then
There's
you go ahead, Simon.
Oh no, sorry. I was just going to say also there's the slight difference between this one just does innuendos, not very good innuendos,
Mhm.
subpar Bond innuendos. Whereas in Pirates of the Caribbean, it was kind of laughing or winking at the audience. So it was kind of like, it was almost like breaking the fourth wall. Like there's that scene in one of the sequels, I think, where Jeffrey Rush gets out his telescope and Johnny Depp gets out a much bigger one right next to him. And it's just like stuff like that, which is kind of silly, but it's kind of funny because it's like basically like nodding at the audience going, this is kind of a bit stupid, isn't it, really? But we're having fun.
Yeah, yeah. It's let's have fun in watching this movie, and not you're never really invited to have fun in this movie, except when they're like, "Look, a monkey."
Yeah. Yeah. Monkey's the best thing. I like the monkey.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and there, you have opportunities for like these epic sword fights, and they don't ever really materialize. Like even the fight with Frank Langella, she's like running away from him, and like
Yeah.
she loses technically the fight to him. She gets her ass kicked
Yeah.
like off the
Yeah.
crow's nest, and it's not cool. That's not a cool pirate scene. That is not Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone with sabers going to town at each other. And you're like, holy shit, what am I looking at here?
Well, yeah. And also, it's just, the fool should have killed her on that. So as an audience, we're having problems with the fact that she survived that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, she
you
should
know,
have been dead or at least deeply crippled.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that it was like I say, there's small bits in this that I enjoyed, like the monkey, or I liked where the almost Python-esque thing of them everybody slapping Matthew Modine like
Mhm.
around the head when he was a slave. That was kind of funny. And I liked how she called him slave for a while. Come on, slave, or hurry up, slave. But it's just it just as a whole, it just didn't. It was like a cake where all the ingredients are kind of right, but it just doesn't taste good when it's finished.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
But it wasn't, but it certainly wasn't terrible. I mean, I'm not going to hate on it. It wasn't like I watched it and was like, oh my God, this is a disaster. It was just like, really? This is all you've got for that amount of money? You know,
yeah. I've definitely seen worse. I've seen worse pirate movies. I saw Yellowbeard a couple of years ago.
there's a bad film.
But I don't know if I'll ever watch it again. There's nothing like compelling enough about it as if it, there's things that are so bad that they're interesting. This you kind of go, I don't understand what happened on this, but I
Everybody
guess,
behind the scenes, like Peter Cook and Graham Chapman talking about it, Marty Feldman planning it. No, I do the actual film.
yeah. Uh, but yeah, I'm trying to think of things to say that I actually liked about it, and that's probably the most damning thing is like
The
I don't
trailers.
really have things I liked about a 2 hour movie that I can pull out and talk about the music or the sets are impressive. They built crazy sets. The boats are amazing.
I'm impressed, but I'm also distressed that Geena Davis was wearing a kind of like, was it, what do you call it, a doublet or a kind of like lacy kind of like pirate shirts, and you didn't see anything over 2 hours. I'm like,
Well,
that's
that was because her husband directed the film. So
PG. That's fine,
PG,
man.
yeah, get the kids in, sell some action figures.
I was looking hard as well, but I couldn't see anything.
But yeah, I mean, I was definitely looking at Geena Davis the whole film. But yeah, yeah, I just don't have much in it that I can say. I think that there's this moment of brilliance or whatever. I think there's moments where I'm like, this is adequate.
What they
And
should have gone for with this was more the kind of the tone of Three Musketeers, Four Musketeers, the Mark Lester versions,
mhm.
where it's almost like more slapsticky, which is kind of heading towards Pirates of the Caribbean again, I think. Um, because that tone seemed to really work, and people died in those films as well. There was like emotional moments, but they still had the innuendo, they still had the slapstick kind of fights, and I feel like this just didn't have that energy. You know,
Completely, yeah. And I do think if Michael Douglas had stuck around, he would have had the wisdom to direct the movie that way.
yeah, I think he probably would have done like a Sean Connery and put his foot down and said, this just isn't good enough. We need a better script, or we need a rewrite, or we need to kind of do something about this. But he obviously could smell a stinker, so he just got the hell out of there.
Well, and I don't know how much older he is than Geena Davis. There is an age difference. The script doesn't really make sense as it is presented. You can't just hot swap out Michael Douglas. It had to have been a different script.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Although, like I say, one of Douglas's main problems was equal screen time. I felt like that wasn't really an issue in this. I feel like Matthew Modine was in this a lot. Um, so I don't know if it was just like what he was actually doing, or maybe Michael Douglas felt uncomfortable being more subservient. I don't know.
yeah, he was at a weird point in his career. I can see him. My name needs to be above the credits and that whole 9 yards at this point.
Or
Um,
needs to be more proactive in the plot. I don't know.
yeah, And I,
Um,
and I do wonder if some of the stuff of her not being proactive enough for my liking in the film is like leftover from that of like, well, he's not a swordsman, he's more of a thief, and so he does these things, and so that's how he provides value. But then
although
you end up
weirdly,
with like no swordsmanship in the movie, and
although weirdly, I think Matthew Modine partly got this part because he could fence.
but he really doesn't. I think he picked up a sword like once.
Or maybe he just got the part because he can fence. They didn't actually bother giving him any fencing to do. He was like, I can fence, I can ride a horse. Oh, you're in.
Yeah.
You got the job. Um, so yeah. I mean, it's been kind of fun. It's always fun when we kind of do a bad film. I don't really feel this was that bad. Like I say, I think if this had had a more reasonable budget, I'd be more forgiving. But I mean, yeah, to be one of the most expensive films in history and come up with this, it's just really. I think it's the Hollywood excesses that these are the films that hit those highs that after that, yeah, we're not going to do that again for a while because obviously that really didn't work badly.
Yeah, I am curious as to what Rennie Harlan's been up to lately because Jamie kept asking me what has he been doing, and I was like, I have not a clue. So he
Probably
doesn't really,
TV.
well, he doesn't really have any credits since 2014.
Yeah, I know. The last couple of films he did were kind of stinkers, weren't they? Or didn't do that well. So maybe he just kind of like is at home counting his money. Um, maybe he's writing the sequel to Cutthroat Island 2.
Apparently, he's attached to several things as a director, but we'll see if any of them actually come out. But yeah, that's kind of
Some of those
interesting.
some of those guys just I think they not as much as actors, but even directors kind of age out because it's like maybe they want too many demands because of their history or too much money, and like Hollywood's like, well, we can just hire somebody new, a lot cheaper, a lot easier.
Yeah. I believe that happens all the time. Geena Davis, of course, she still appears in things from time to time, but she has more or less
Didn't she become pretty big on TV? Where she was the president in one show or something? Or
she's had multiple goes at like a network whatever show, and none of them ever really took off, which I always thought was strange. The big stabs I remember at it were kind of in the 90s when I was in college, where I'd be like, oh, I would watch that if I wasn't amazingly, astoundingly busy. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, she had the Geena Davis show in 2000, so I guess that was right after I graduated, and that lasted only a
What was
season.
that? What was that? Was that like a comedy show? Or?
Yeah, it was like a sitcom.
That's
And then
funny.
she had that show where where she was the like Secretary of State or something like that, I want to say.
Yeah, they look pretty good. They look a bit like 24 type thing,
Yeah,
really.
but
Um, I mean, I'm guessing this probably not. I mean, like I think she was being a Hollywood actress. She's probably going to age out pretty fast anyway. But I think this obviously didn't do her any favors, because up until Cutthroat, I think she was a pretty big box office star,
mhm.
probably for about nearly 10 years. And this probably would have kept her up there if it had been a hit for another 5, 10 years. But I think it kind of made probably directors a little bit shy of hiring her after this.
So you're right. I'm looking at it. She did Long Kiss Goodnight, which didn't do very well, and then she was supporting in Stuart Little and Stuart Little 2. In between
Yeah,
those, she did her sitcom. And then after that, it's mostly been TV. The name of the show you're thinking of was Commander in Chief, which lasted
that's it.
19 episodes. And then she's done a lot of kind of indie movies. She did appear on, I'd forgotten, on Glow, which was one of my favorite things Netflix ever put out,
Mm.
as a like a the entertainment director for a casino in Las Vegas, and she was typically great in that. And
Yeah.
then she's going to be in something called Fairyland this year. I have no idea what the heck that is.
Okay. Yeah. I know.
Um,
I know. We talked about this before. I think we did the Long Kiss Goodnight, but I think around the time she did the Stuart Littles, she started having kids as well.
yes.
So she kind of like that purposely did less anyway.
Yeah, I think she's
Um,
married to like a therapist or something like that now. I don't know.
is that because of Cutthroat Island?
Yeah. But
So why
she
do, why do you want to be a pirate? Why do you want to be a pirate?
she Stuart met her briefly, or at least Stuart saw her, made a meeping sound and ran away. She Stuart works for a company that's involved in show business, and he was standing there in the break room, and she was there doing a presentation or something, and she just
Wow.
came walking into the break room, and so I got a message of, I just saw Geena Davis, and I was very jealous. So
Oh wow. You
but
should have handed her like a nylon stocking from like, could you sign that in respect to the fly, please? That's what I would have done. Could you sign the telepod I made myself over 5 years?
can you sign
Um,
this fly for me?
it was
um
plastic. Yeah.
I would just meep and run away is what I would do. um
Yeah. Well, she probably hit punch you in the face. That's what that's what she does a lot in this film. So it's sad.
Yeah, I'd take that as a badge of honor if Geena Davis punched me in the face.
Well, there's that slight feeling as well, isn't there, of her working with Rennie Harlin. Um, it's a bit the same as the Resident Evil couple. It's a bit like if you kind of keep getting directed by your husband, it's probably not a good thing. Like maybe if you try one off,
Hmm.
it'll work. But if he's the only person who's employing you, you know, it's got
Well,
to
I
be
mean, he clearly, I mean, she's coming off Thelma and Louise, which was, gigantic, League of Their Own, which was gigantic.
yeah.
And it was really that turn which I don't think was crazy, to try and turn her into an action star for her
No, she's got the physicality.
Yeah, and she totally proves it in Long Kiss Goodnight. So they managed to do it, but that movie again, talk about a movie that had a lot of baggage around it by the time it came out.
Again, we talked about it before, but the most expensive script and
Mhm.
again a kind of weird genre where it's a bit of a noir but a bit of an action film, so people can't really classify
Mhm. Yeah, it hits a lot of my buttons for enjoying the movie.
it.
Uh, but yeah, it's anyway, it is remarkable that within what 5 years, then the Pirates of the Caribbean movies were coming out. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, they came out I think in 2003, so it's maybe 8 years after this.
yeah. Well, so
Um,
that's enough time to kind of forgive and forget and try it again.
oh yeah, especially these days when you get Spider-Man rebooted within about 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and obviously they were a big hit, and I don't know if they're still going now, but they were chugging away. They did about five or six of them, didn't they? Although there's no other pirate films. Let's point that out as well. So that is like one singular example that worked. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I say, I wasn't horribly offended. But at the same time, I could tell this this is not a film I'm going to watch a lot.
Yeah, my big, if I was to make any recommendation, it would be just go watch Against All Flags. Um, that's a phenomenal movie, and you'll have fun. That is funny while you're watching it. And anyway, I don't really have anything else to say about it.
Yeah.
But we will be back. Simon and I already have something else lined up for the next time.
Mhm.
That's going to be a little more Oscar-y, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot more screaming, essentially.
and then somehow having more kudos than Cutthroat Island. But we'll be back in pretty short order. And if you have not, I'm now ending podcasts by asking people to please comment and share and like and ring bells and do
Be
all the
positive. Be
things.
positive.
Yeah.
Keep it nice though. Keep it
Yeah.
nice.
But yeah,
Remember, these are just opinions of ourselves. They're not facts.
yeah, and I'm always willing to hear other people's opinions. It's always interesting when people drop either into the SoundCloud, or I'm not on Twitter anymore, so you really need to go to the blog and drop comments. If you want to get my attention, you can also try Facebook and Insta. But yeah, we're out there. We'd love to hear from you. And so that is all I have to say about that for the time being. We
See
will
you
be
next time,
back.
guys.
All right.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you,
So find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.